What if everything the Brown family ever told the world was only half the truth? And the real story, the one buried in sealed messages, hidden documents, and years of silence, is finally breaking open right now. Because this time, the lies are being exposed in court, the kids are speaking out, and the family is shattering in ways we have never seen before. And trust me, what comes next will change everything you thought you knew. The death of a child should unite a family in shared grief and remembrance, but for Kody Brown, the tragic passing of his son Garrison became the final unraveling of every remaining bond he had with his surviving children. And what unfolded at the memorial services has been described by insiders as so shocking and so emotionally tone-deaf that it severed the few fragile threads still connecting this father to the kids who once looked up to him. Because while most families cling tighter during heartbreak, the Brown family instead watched Kody implode any remaining trust they have left in him. And the emerging details paint a picture of a man who seemed more committed to performing grief than sharing it. A man who treated a sacred moment like a stage rather than a place of mourning. And his behavior was so staggering that even children who still held out reluctant hope for reconciliation decided at that moment they were done for good. And the core of the issue, according to multiple family sources, is that Kody appeared consumed not with honoring his son or supporting his devastated children, but with how he looked, how he came across, how he was perceived by others at the memorial services. And instead of standing beside his grieving family, he allegedly centered himself, making remarks and decisions that left his children stunned, hurt, and completely disconnected from him during a moment that should have humbled any parent. And Garrison's death was no ordinary loss for this family. It was the passing of a young man already estranged from his father, someone who died without the chance to repair a fractured relationship. And observers close to the Browns believe that reality alone should have been enough to shake Kody into reflection. Yet what happened instead was a display so self-focused that even his children, who had tolerated years of favoritism and manipulation, said enough. And these are not children prone to exaggeration or rebellion. These are adults who witnessed their father systematically dismantle relationships with their mothers, who saw him prioritize one household over all others, who endured emotional inconsistency and favoritism for years, and still, even with all of that, some of them held on, hoping that maybe at the worst moment, he would rise to the occasion and be the father they needed. But instead, whatever happened during those memorial services was the final blow. So powerful that children who previously tried to maintain contact cut ties on the spot. And the fallout became painfully public, with Payton and Kody Brown making statements that no parent would ever want to hear. And they made them, not quietly, not cryptically, but publicly and clearly, saying they had not seen their father since the funeral. And when your children say that the last time they saw you was at your brother's burial, and they say it with finality, that reveals the magnitude of what occurred at those services. And for Payton, the estrangement became so final and so overwhelming that he later took to TikTok, pleading with his followers not to compare him to Kody, begging them not to associate him with that guy. And those two words, that guy, built a wall of emotional distance thicker than anything spoken on Sister Wives. Because Payton was not being dramatic, he was setting a boundary out of self-preservation. And then there was the televised moment that should have been Kody's redemption arc, his breakdown on Special Forces, where he cried about being a bad husband and father, admitting that he misunderstood what being a good dad meant, admitting he did it wrong. And while viewers saw a man in tears, his own children saw something else entirely. Because none of them were informed he would be discussing their relationships on national television. And if he had truly been seeking to repair those relationships, reaching out beforehand would have been the minimum required. But he didn't do that.
and instead he cried on camera and called it accountability, while ignoring the very children his words impacted. And when Mykelti watched the episode during a Patreon live stream, she broke down with conflicting emotions, saying it was refreshing to hear him take accountability, while also acknowledging that it was the first time in her life she had ever heard him admit he was wrong. And imagine being his daughter and learning that your father accepts responsibility not from a phone call, not from a conversation, not from healing work, but from a TV show about the Browns forever.
And even after filming, when Kody reached out to Mykelti, he still did not reach out to all his children, only to the one who already had some contact with him. Because real change requires effort, and effort is something Kody has never consistently applied to his relationships. And according to Mykelti and Tony, he reached out to her several times after filming, yet not to others, not to those most harmed, not to those who publicly said they had not spoken to him since the funeral, which proves that the Special Forces breakdown was selective damage control, not true transformation. Because if he had changed, the very first people he would have contacted would have been the children most wounded by his memorial behavior, as well as those who openly cut contact. But instead, he gravitated toward the easiest relationship, the lowest risk of rejection, and ignored the harder emotional work, just as he has done for years. And then came another revelation, the birth of Madison's fourth child, a major event in the family, one filled with joy amidst grief. And yet Kody allegedly did not reach out to her either. No congratulations, no call, no message, nothing. And this is the same daughter he accused on Sister Wives of being the ringleader of family gossip. Yet when she experienced a major life milestone, he made no effort to acknowledge it, proving once again that his televised accountability was hollow, because when given an opportunity for real-world change, he chose silence. And when Mykelti later explained that Kody tends to lump all his kids together rather than treat them individually, it exposed the deeper issue. He avoids individualized responsibility by pretending his failures are general rather than specific. And in doing so, he continues the same pattern of favoritism by investing attention only in the children who still support him, while ignoring the ones who need repair. In Logan's public support of his father, posting encouragement on Instagram during Special Forces provided Kody with the validation he craves, the validation that allows him to avoid doing the hard work of repairing the deeper broken bonds. Because as long as one child praises him, he can convince himself that he is not the problem, even while the others are publicly severing ties. And insiders believe this selective dynamic is creating further division among the siblings, with some supporting their father and others rejecting him completely. And this only deepens the fractures caused by years of emotional inconsistency, favoritism, manipulation, and neglect. And Garrison's memorial was the breaking point, the moment when years of unresolved pain collided with the father's self-centered behavior, creating a line that many of the children refused to allow him to cross again. And now the Brown family stands in the aftermath of that pivotal moment, with relationships shattered beyond what cameras have captured. And insiders insist that what Kody lost that day was not just connection, but the last remnants of credibility as a father. Because in the moment his family needed him most, he made it all about himself. And once a parent demonstrates that pattern at such a tragic moment, it becomes almost impossible for their children to trust again. As dawn crept slowly over the distant desert horizon, the Brown family found themselves pushed deeper into a storm of secrets, unspoken truths, and rising tension that refused to fade. And the quiet morning air hung heavy over their fractured home, as whispers from the courthouse still echoed in every corner, every room, every unsettled heart. And Kody walked through the living room carrying the weight of everything he had said, everything he had denied, and everything that was now slipping out of his control, while Robin watched him with a mix of fear and confusion, sensing that the world she had built with him was no longer holding steady, no longer protected by the narratives they crafted together. And Christine, miles away,
felt a strange stillness inside her, because for the first time, she sensed that the truth, long buried beneath years of pain, was finally surfacing, finally breathing. And Janelle too sat quietly, clutching her phone, knowing there were more messages, documents, and forgotten receipts waiting to be revealed, waiting to unravel the story she had been fed for so long. And Mary stood by the window, staring out into the early light, wondering how they had reached this point, where love, promises, unity, and loyalty had twisted into a maze of accusations, bitterness, and hidden alliances. And the internet buzzed wildly, people dissecting every detail, every statement, every contradiction, as the family tried to hold on to a reality that was slipping like sand through open fingers. And Kody knew the next hearing would not be easier because the judge had demanded more clarity, more transparency, more evidence. And for the first time, he sensed something cracking beneath him, something beyond his control, something deeper than the narratives he had repeated for years. And Robin feared the past. She had locked away tightly, the past she swore would never resurface again. But documents had been unsealed, names mentioned, timelines checked, and there was no escaping what the world was beginning to see. And in the middle of all this, the older kids gathered quietly, speaking in low tones, agreeing that if the truth needed to be told, they would tell it all, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how messy. Because they were tired of corrections, tired of revisions. They wanted to tell their own story in their own voices, unfiltered and unbiased.
Tired of being painted as rebellious or ungrateful when all they ever wanted was honesty and stability, and the truth hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. As the attorneys prepared their arguments, building cases, collecting evidence, connecting every missing piece, while outside, fans of the show speculated, argued, debated, choosing sides and reshaping narratives faster than the family could keep up with. And deep inside, Kody felt the ground shifting beneath his authority, because the children no longer feared speaking up. The wives no longer feared choosing themselves, and the world no longer believed every polished explanation he offered. And as the day moved forward, tension grew thicker as the court waited for additional records and digital logs that held more truths than anyone expected. Truths that would force confessions, shifts, and consequences none of them were prepared to face. And still, the desert sun rolls higher, shining on a family built on faith, promises, and unity, now split wide open by silence, betrayal, and the undeniable force of truth. And as the final truths surface and the last sealed records come to light, one thing becomes undeniable. The Brown family will never return to the world they once knew, because every confession, every message, and every revelation has rewritten their story forever. And now, with the world watching, their future hangs in the balance, leaving one final question echoing through the chaos. What happens to a family when the truth refuses to stay buried anymore?